Welcome back, everyone. You know I love a good deep dive, and today's topic is really going to get us thinking. We're going to explore mystical experiences and how they connect to the law of one.
Yeah, these mystical experiences, they're not just some random events. It's like there's this pattern throughout history and across cultures, almost like a hidden language, you know?
So we've got philosophy, religious studies, psychology even. What's the goal here? What are we hoping to uncover in this deep dive?
We really want to understand these mystical experiences and, see how they connect to the law of one. Like, do they actually support that main idea of unity? Can they teach us something about consciousness and how we evolve spiritually? Those are some big questions we'll be looking at.
Okay, so for someone who might be totally new to all of this, how would you describe what a mystical experience actually is?
Imagine, like, just for a moment, your normal everyday awareness kind of fades away, and suddenly you feel this incredible connection to something much bigger than yourself, like a sense of being one with everything. It could be a feeling of the divine, or just this deep knowing that goes beyond our normal understanding.
It's like getting a glimpse behind the curtain of reality.
Yeah.
And the law of one tells us that reality is all connected, right?
Right. The law of one says that everything in the universe is connected. It's all one. It all comes from the same source of love and light. And when we look at mystical experiences across different cultures, that idea of unity keeps coming up again and again.
So let's get into some specific examples. We've got traditions like Sufism, Buddhism, Christianity, shamanism. They all have stories of people experiencing these altered states of consciousness.
Let's start with Sufism. There was this Sufi mystic, Ibn al-Arabi. He talked about this concept called dar that really challenges how we think about time. It's like a state where the past, present, and future all come together, sort of like what mystics describe as the eternal now.
Wow, that's a really powerful concept. It's like stepping outside of our normal perception of time and experiencing everything as connected.
Exactly. And then we have someone like Meister Eckhart. He was a Christian mystic. He was really big on detachment from the ego and this idea of deification, which is like merging with the divine. And again, it's about moving beyond our individual limitations and experiencing this deep state of union.
It's amazing how these mystics, even though they come from such different backgrounds and belief systems, they seem to arrive at these very similar insights about reality. So would you say these experiences are like evidence that supports the law of one?
They definitely fit in with that core principle of the law of one, that everything is one. It's like these mystics are tapping into that truth directly, actually experiencing it.
It's like the mystical experience is proof of what the law of one is talking about. But it's not just about feeling connected, right? The law of one also says that service to others is really important for spiritual growth.
You're absolutely right. And you see this reflected in the ethical side of many mystical traditions. A lot of times, after having these powerful experiences, people feel a strong need to show more love and compassion and to make a positive impact on the world around them.
So it's like that feeling of interconnectedness naturally leads to wanting to help others because we understand that we're all part of the same thing.
Exactly. However, it's also important to remember that not all mystical experiences are necessarily positive. The Law of One also talks about what's called the negative path, which is focused on serving the self. This path is all about separation, control, and wanting power over others.
So are there mystical experiences that actually go against the message of love and unity in the law of one?
Unfortunately, yes. Some people have reported encounters with beings or entities that promote a really negative worldview, a worldview based on separation and control. These experiences can be very disturbing, and they can sometimes lead people down a path that's opposed to the law of one's message of love and serving others.
Wow, that's kind of unsettling. It seems like it's really important to be discerning with these experiences. Just because someone has a mystical experience, it doesn't automatically mean it's positive or coming from a good place.
You got it. The Law of One emphasizes that we always have the free will to choose our path. We can align ourselves with love or fear, with unity or separation.
So it seems like these experiences, whether positive or negative, they really highlight how important it is to be discerning. What do you think?
Oh, definitely. We need to be careful about the messages we receive and the energies we encounter. Ultimately, we have to choose a path that resonates with our hearts and aligns with our values.
Now, before we move on to specific lessons we can learn from these experiences, let's acknowledge that studying these things is not exactly easy.
Right. It can be tough to analyze these experiences objectively because they're so personal and subjective. There's this thing called the constructivist perspective that basically says our culture and our personal experiences have a big influence on how we interpret these altered states of consciousness.
So someone raised in a Buddhist tradition might interpret a mystical experience differently than someone raised as a Christian, even if they both feel that same core sense of unity.
That's exactly right. That's why it's crucial to be aware of our own biases and be open to different perspectives when we're talking about this.
It's like trying to explain a dream to someone else.
Yeah.
The dream might be powerful, but the way you interpret it is always going to be filtered through your own unique lens.
Yeah, and while there are scientists who are studying the physical changes that happen during things like meditation, thanks to groups like the HeartMath Institute, we still have a lot to learn about consciousness and how these altered states actually happen.
So a little bit of humility goes a long way here. We're
Yeah.
dealing with something that's both incredibly personal and universally relevant, a real mystery.
Exactly, and that's what makes it so fascinating. It's an invitation to explore ourselves and the nature of reality, and to be okay with not having all the answers.
Okay, I think I'm ready to dive a little deeper into the specific lessons we can get from mystical experiences. What's next?
Well, next, let's look at how these experiences can shed light on certain teachings of the law of one, particularly the idea of densities. That consciousness evolves through different levels of vibration. You were talking about densities before. Maybe we should take a closer look at that.
Yeah, let's talk about those densities.
Yeah.
I understand that the law of one says that reality is made up of 7 of these densities, like levels of spiritual evolution.
That's a really good way to think about it. Each density is like a different level of awareness, a different level of understanding and vibrational frequency. It's like climbing a spiral staircase towards higher and higher states of consciousness.
So where does Earth fit into all of this? What density are we at right now?
Right now, Earth is actually in the middle of transitioning from third density to fourth density. Third density is all about choice. It's where we learn about duality, good and evil, service to others versus service to self. It's a tough place to be, but it's where we grow and evolve the most.
So these mystical experiences we've been talking about, do they relate to these densities at all?
That's where things get really interesting. Mystical experiences can actually give us a glimpse into what the higher densities are like. They can give us a little taste of that unity, that interconnectedness that becomes more and more clear in those higher realms.
So when someone has a mystical experience, it's kind of like they're getting a sneak peek at what fourth density might be like.
That's it. It's like their consciousness shifts for a moment and they're able to perceive reality from a much broader perspective, a perspective that's more in line with the teachings of the law of one.
I'm starting to see the connection now. But what can these experiences really teach us about the law of one specifically? Do they proof it in some way?
Well, remember, the law of one basically says that everything is one. So when someone has a mystical experience and they feel that deep sense of interconnectedness, that's a direct experience of that teaching. It's not just an idea anymore, it's something they've actually felt.
So it's like the experience itself is evidence of the interconnectedness that the law of one talks about.
Right. And it goes beyond just the feeling of unity, too. Mystical experiences can also tell us about the importance of love and light in the law of one.
How so? How do love and light show up in those experiences?
Well, many mystical traditions talk about the higher densities as being full of love and light, and people who've had these experiences often describe feeling incredibly peaceful, joyful, and compassionate afterwards. It's like they've touched that source of unconditional love that the law of one talks about.
So it's not just about having some kind of cool experience. It's about being transformed by it, becoming more loving and understanding.
You said it perfectly. That's why mystical experiences are so powerful for spiritual growth. They can inspire us, motivate us, and give us a taste of what's possible as we continue to learn and evolve.
I'm curious about those negative mystical experiences we were talking about earlier, the ones that are more about serving the self. Do they fit into this density model too?
Yes, they do, but it's a little more complicated. The law of one says that even entities in higher densities have choices to make. Some choose to serve others, while others choose to serve themselves.
So even in those higher realms, there's still that duality of choice.
Exactly. And those negative entities, sometimes associated with groups like the Orion Confederation, they're operating from a higher density, but they have a very different agenda. They're all about separation and control.
And their influence can even be felt down here in third density, right? Like in the way power structures are manipulated and how fear and division are used to control people.
That's why being discerning is so crucial. It's not enough to just have a mystical experience. We have to really think about where it's coming from, what the message is, and how it's affecting us and others.
It goes back to that idea of personal responsibility, which is so central to the law of one. We have the power to choose to align ourselves with love or fear, with unity or separation.
And these mystical experiences, both the positive and the negative ones, can be catalysts for that choice. They can show us the path, give us glimpses of what we're capable of, and ultimately help us evolve toward a greater expression of love, wisdom, and service.
I'm starting to see how all of these pieces fit together. The mystical experiences, the law of one, the densities, they all create a much bigger, more meaningful picture.
And that's the beauty of exploring these topics in depth. We begin to see the interconnectedness of everything, the incredible tapestry of consciousness that weaves through all of reality.
Okay, let's pause for a moment and review what we've learned so far about the connection between mystical experiences and the law of one.
We've seen how these experiences can actually confirm the law of one's main idea that everything is one. It's not just a theory, it's something that people feel and experience in these powerful states of consciousness.
And these experiences can also teach us about the nature of those higher densities, giving us a glimpse of the love, light, and understanding that we can experience as we evolve.
But we also need to be aware of the potential for those negative mystical experiences, the ones that are more aligned with serving the self.
That's where discernment is so important. The law of one reminds us that we have the free will to choose our path, and that means carefully considering our experiences and the messages we receive, always striving to align ourselves with love and understanding.
This has been a really interesting exploration so far. What should we talk about next?
Let's shift gears now and focus on the practical applications. What are some of the lessons we can learn from all of this? How can we use these insights about mystical experiences and the law of one in our everyday lives and on our spiritual journeys?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? It's great to talk about all this, but how do we actually use it? What can we take away from all this about mystical experiences and the law of one to make our lives and spiritual journeys better?
You know, if there's one big lesson that comes out of all this, it's the importance of developing something we could call unity consciousness. Unity consciousness. I like that.
Yeah.
But what does that actually mean in real life? How do we actually develop that awareness day to day?
It starts with changing how we see things. Instead of thinking of ourselves as separate individuals, we need to start recognizing that everything's connected. We're all part of this huge web of life, all coming from the same source.
So it's about letting go of that ego-driven idea that we're separate and embracing a more whole, connected way of seeing the world.
Right. And changing our perspective like this changes how we interact with the world and each other.
Can you give us some examples of how unity consciousness might actually show up in everyday life?
Sure. Like when we do something kind or compassionate, it becomes less about helping others and more about recognizing that we're all in this together. It's like
Yeah.
we're all on the same team working towards the same goal.
I love that. It shifts things from feeling like an obligation to a feeling of connection and shared purpose.
Exactly. And this sense of unity can even help us handle disagreements better.
Really? How does unity consciousness help with that?
If we understand that even people who disagree with us are still part of the same connected whole, we can be more empathetic and understanding when we have conflicts. We can see past the surface differences and recognize that we're all connected underneath it all.
It's about finding that common ground, that shared humanity, even when we have different opinions.
Right. And that can make it easier to have productive conversations and find solutions that work for everyone.
So developing unity consciousness is about recognizing our interconnectedness and letting that guide how we act and how we relate to others.
Yeah.
What are some practical things we can do to build this awareness?
Definitely. Things like meditation, mindfulness, and just being in nature can really help us quiet our minds and tune in to that deeper sense of connection. It's about making space to experience that stillness and oneness that's always there underneath all the busyness of life.
It's like hitting the pause button on all the thoughts in our heads
Yeah,
and just being present with the interconnectedness of everything.
exactly. And another great practice is cultivating gratitude.
Gratitude. How does that relate to unity consciousness?
When we feel true gratitude, it naturally makes our awareness bigger. We start to appreciate that whole web of life that supports us, all the people, seen and unseen, who help us in so many ways.
It's like acknowledging that we're not alone. We're part of something much bigger and more amazing.
And realizing that can be really powerful, really life-changing.
This is all making so much sense to me. It's like I'm seeing the world in a new way.
That's the beautiful thing about exploring the mystical path. It's not just about learning facts, it's about shifting how we see things, about transforming who we are.
It's about living the principles of the law of one,
Yeah.
not just understanding them in our heads.
You got it. And remember, it's a journey, not a destination. We're all always evolving, learning, and growing.
So let's embrace the journey, be open to new experiences, and keep trying to live in alignment with love and unity.
Right. And let's not forget the power of those mystical experiences. They can give us such deep insights, guidance, and inspiration on our spiritual paths.
Before we finish up this deep dive, I want to give our listeners some key takeaways to think about as they continue their own explorations, like Law of One inspired lessons.
I like that. Let's share some of the wisdom we've uncovered today.
Okay, lesson number one. Remember that we are all one. Embrace that interconnectedness of everything and let it guide your thoughts, actions, and relationships.
Lesson number 2, choose love, not fear. We have the opportunity to choose between love and fear in every moment. Pick love, and you'll see how it changes your life and the world around you.
Lesson number three. Develop unity consciousness. Practice things like gratitude, mindfulness, and compassion to become more aware of that interconnected web of life.
Lesson number 4, be discerning. Remember that not every mystical experience is a good one. Think critically about every experience you have and trust your intuition to figure out what truly resonates with your heart.
And lastly, lesson number five. Embrace the mystery. The universe is vast and full of amazing things. Stay curious, keep exploring, and never stop learning and growing.
Those are wonderful lessons to keep in mind. May they inspire you to live a life full of love, light, and unity.
This has been an incredible journey into the world of mystical experiences and the Law of One. Thank you so much for joining us today.
And thank you for your thoughtful questions and your genuine curiosity. May you always be surrounded by the love and light of the one infinite creator.
Until next time, keep seeking, keep learning, and keep shining your bright light.